As a white man of European descent, I thought I'd get on here and say what needs to be said. The white-on-white crime has to stop. Since Fox News and Republican pundits love to talk about black-on-black crime all the time, I think it's worth noting that the majority of mass shootings are committed by white men. And the majority of victims of those shootings are white people, mainly white children. Actually, the majority of perpetrators of crimes in this country are white men. So, since one party, the Republican Party, likes to make everything about race and broadcast every time a black person commits a crime or a brown person commits a crime or an immigrant commits a crime, I think it's worth noting again that today we found out the shooter of Charlie Kirk, a white man, was Tyler Robinson, another white man. We've got a real white-on-white problem in this country, and we need to fix the white-on-white crime.
White people. If crime statistics really mattered to us, we would be talking about white men every damn day. We as white people love to throw around statistics when it comes to the black community. We love to misconstrue data about poverty rates, crime rates, single-parent households. Here's the thing. If you really want to talk about problematic behavior in terms of statistics, we need to talk about white men. Most mass shootings in America? White men. School shootings? White men. Intimate partner violence, typically known as domestic violence? White men. Police brutality and systemic violence? White men. Online harassment and extremism? White men. Domestic terrorism? White men. Serial killers? White men. The demographic making up the vast majority of CEOs, judges, senators, and police chiefs who refuse to hold white men responsible? White men. And yet us white men are really talked about as being a problem. Few white people are asking, what's wrong with white men? What's wrong with the culture? Few white men are demanding that we be fixed. And why? Because we as white men humanize and individualize white violent offenders. And it's time to flip the script. It's shame and blame because I know white males are incredibly fragile when it comes to that. But instead to name what's really going on and who continues to be protected and not held accountable because of selective storytelling. I hope this helps.
Hello guys, welcome once again to the channel. I hope wherever you're watching, you're having a great time. Now, over the years, we have always looked at America and known that there are certain things that have always been blamed on black people and there are those that have been blamed on white people. In today's video, we want to talk about the violence that has always been happening in America and whether these issues of violence are just solely for black people to be blamed, or it is something that is cutting across, or also is it that whites do it the most? I came across some clips here that are really revealing because we've heard about things that are happening in America. For example, let's talk about school shootings. Who among the races commits much of the school shootings that happen in America? Have you ever heard of blacks going to shoot in schools? If they have happened, they are very few, but in most cases, they are whites. And that is what some whites are coming to realize. And they're saying that they have been the problem in America, not black people. Not black people at all. It is the whites who have made America become inhabitable for everybody, because they have been the ones who support gun violence and don't want people to be denied gun ownership. They're the ones who have always supported policies that discriminate against other members of the American society. And they're the ones who have continued to perpetuate segregation, even in existence, even in employment, and many other things that come with it. I have compiled some clips here that are really talking about this topic in an in-depth manner. So I wanted to watch some of the comments that white Americans are making in this clip. Then I shall come back in the end with my commentaries.
We talk about how ironic it is that the right demonizes people of color when the only time I feared for my life has been around a white man. I get so many hate comments like these few here. The time I just write it off as immature, angry men, but the times that I've genuinely been scared that violence was going to be inflicted upon me have been white men. Not to mention that a lot of domestic violence, as well as many mass shootings, are committed by white men. There are going to be people in any demographic that commit crimes, but the fact that the right focuses so intensely on the single crime that a person of color commits is so dishonest. Some of the craziest things that have happened to me since I started posting is that I've gotten my account banned because white supremacists mass reported me for being underage, which I'm clearly not. They found my phone number and leaked it, so I had to change my phone number. They tried to get me fired by contacting any school in Chicago to see if I worked there. There was even an online page to see who was calling which school. I've literally been called a race traitor and told that I will be lynched along with POC. So no, people of color aren't the problem here. It is white men, and that's why I make the content I do. They prove it to me more and more every single day why it's necessary.
This is why people don't trust white people, because it is peak whiteness and colonizer behavior to demand civility for a man who denies others their humanity. That's the oppressor, and we do not need to sympathize or empathize with them. And don't get me wrong, because I long for a world where there is no violence in it. But until all of us are free, none of us are free. And violence is part of the equation because of the oppressor, not the oppressed. We need to understand that violence comes in many forms, and white people need to learn it most of all. And if none of that is enough to convince you, then how about the fact that Charlie Kirk said empathy is a made-up new age word that does harm, and that is the one directive of his that I am willing to honor.
White people can't gaslight me into thinking that black people are violent when you have historically been the most violent across a whole nation. I'm not ever going to compare someone running in a corner store and robbing it because they live in a system inside of a neighborhood that you created so they fail, to you pulling out somebody's teeth and putting it in your mouth. Boiling babies, raping and unaliving people. If we're going to talk about violence, it starts with you. It will always start with you. I don't care about a carjacking. I don't care about a pew-pew. It starts with you. If we compare and contrast apples to oranges, you win every time at the most violent, vicious criminals. Without any without moral clause, morality, anything. Savages, I would say. Because I would never put nobody on a boat, packed, stacked high, and make them work for me for free. While I grape their women, take off the sexual parts of their men, also grape their children and sell them. I would never. So when we talking about violence, talk about that.
They want you to be scared of Iranian sleeper cells, while white guys dress up like police officers, knock on lawmakers' doors, and shoot and kill them. The most dangerous group of people in the United States right now are white, MAGA, Christian nationalists.
We talk about how ironic it is that the right demonizes people of color when the only time I feared for my life has been around a white man. I get so many hate comments like these few here. Most of the time I just write it off as immature, angry men, but the times that I've genuinely been scared that violence was going to be inflicted upon me have been white men. Not to mention that a lot of domestic violence, as well as many mass shootings, are committed by white men. There are going to be people in any demographic that commit crimes, but the fact that the right focuses so intensely on the single crime that a person of color commits is so dishonest. Some of the craziest things that have happened to me since I started posting is that I've gotten my account banned because white supremacists mass reported me for being underage, which I'm clearly not. They found my phone number and leaked it, so I had to change my phone number. They tried to get me fired by contacting any school in Chicago to see if I worked there. There was even an online page to see who was calling which school. I've literally been called a race traitor and told that I will be lynched along with POC. So no, people of color aren't the problem here. It is white men, and that's why I make the content I do. They prove it to me more and more every single day why it's necessary.
Oh good, I'm so glad that you brought this important topic up, because something I've always been curious about is if there are more white people who are being killed by police. And to be sure, there are. As you can see, with Black Americans being 13% of the population, they're disproportionately affected, but that is a lot of white people who are being killed by police. Why are you okay with it? Where are the white-led protests? Where are the white-led organizations speaking out against police brutality? Why are there not more white Americans joining with the advocacy that Black Americans are already doing to speak out against police brutality towards innocent people? And don't try to sell me on the line that it's because white people experience oppression every day, it's just that they're more stoic about handling it. Because despite what a lot of you think, I didn't just arrive yesterday. I was born and raised here, and I've noticed. that collectively you have a very long history of rioting. Anytime you hear the whisper that the hair on a white person's head may have been harmed, even if that whisper was a total fabrication. You riot when your sports teams lose. You riot when your sports teams win. You even riot when a football coach loses their job because they were ignoring allegations of abuse. You pretty much riot anytime you perceive that you might be losing power. So it's not because you're meek and that you don't protest anytime you perceive injustice. So what is it?
There's 10 million crimes committed in the United States, and out of those 10 million, 7 million were committed by white people. Now, I know I just did this video, but I'm doing this again, especially for you. And then there were 2.6 million committed by people of color, and the rest were by other races. Let me break it down even better for you. I've got 10 million cookies, Iron, and I gave you 7 million of those cookies, and I only gave Joe 2 million of those cookies. Who's got more cookies, Iron? It's really simple math. We don't got to try to make it complicated. It's really simple. And guess what? The government that provides you those numbers, they do it just that simple too.
White people can't gaslight me into thinking that black people are violent, when you have historically been the most violent across a whole nation. I'm not ever going to compare someone running in a corner store and robbing it because they live in a system inside of a neighborhood that you created so they fail, to you pulling out somebody's teeth and putting it in your mouth. Boiling babies, raping and unaliving people. If we're going to talk about violence, it starts with you. It will always start with you. I don't care about a carjacking. I don't care about a pew-pew. It starts with you. If we compare and contrast apples to oranges, you win every time at the most violent, vicious criminals. Without any without moral clause, morality, anything, savages, I would say. Because I would never put nobody on a boat, packed, stacked high, and make them work for me for free. While I grape their women, take off the sexual parts of their men, also grape their children and sell them. I would never. So when we talking about violence, talk about that. Talk about that.
The FBI stats we've been referencing, they only track arrests. They don't track prosecutions or convictions, not the time someone wasn't arrested at all, even though they should have been, and they certainly don't reflect wrongful arrests. They don't account for the traffic stops that turn into felony charges. They don't account for the warnings white men get or the vacations they're sent on after killing unarmed black and brown men while wearing a uniform. But if we actually charge white men the way we charge black and brown men, if we tracked all of the violence they commit, especially the interpersonal, domestic, sexual, and politically motivated kind, white male violence would be off the charts, as you said. It would be innumerable at that point. And even with all that bias in their favor, white men account for nearly 2 times the arrests of any other race, for violent crimes specifically. And that's the whole point. The system doesn't just let them off. It builds the numbers to hide these violent crimes. And the media, they use words like manifesto, political violence, they focus on mental illness, or they try to humanize the person. They say he was well-educated, he was a churchgoer, he was a family man, a pillar of his community. So it's not just what's missing from the data, it's the way everything else around it is designed to protect white men. And even with all of that working in their favor, they still top the charts for violent crimes and arrests. That should tell us everything that we need to know.
So one thing I think is interesting is I grew up in a small town, very rural, 3,500 people, 1 stoplight, primarily white, primarily conservative. There were a few Hispanic families, but no black people, no Asian descent, none of that. And I now live about 2 hours away in a metro area of more than 3 million people, obviously very diverse. And it's just interesting to me how strong racism can be. When you think about the idea that anytime I have looked up the county jail roster for my hometown, all white people, and primarily males. And it just goes to show that the people in my hometown, those who are afraid of or cast blame upon or hatred for black and brown people, Asian people, anyone who doesn't look like them, right? And they think of where I live as I would never go there. I would never go there if I didn't want to get unalived, scary people and whatever, And In reality, like, their neighbor is probably in jail for SAing their granddaughter. And you still support white people to the fullest extent. Like, it's...
So 4 white kids in Semi Valley, just outside of a theater, attacked a black kid. They're all teenagers. Now, none of the white kids knew this black kid that they attacked. They were just looking for someone to attack. Of course, somebody of color. Now, the video catches them saying racial slurs as they beat the shit out of this kid. And get this, it gets even crazier that one of the kids has a father who is in the police department in Semi Valley. Go figure, it's always the fucking kid of a policeman. So not only are these kids arrested for a hate crime, but also they're going after the parents. And this is the part that makes me so fucking happy. Because fucking parents that don't know that their fucking kids are racist need to fucking pay for that. Yeah, you need to reap the repercussions of your fucking kid because you're so fucking up your own ass that you can't even see your fucking kid is racist because you're probably racist too. So, yeah, I hope these fucking parents see some time in prison. I hope these parents get their fucking bank accounts wiped clean because of this fucking lawsuit that's coming after you. It's a fucking hate crime, and you're gonna pay.
Statistics don't lie, Dwight says. They say black people are the overwhelming majority in violent attacks? Really? I swear I just did a video about this yesterday! If you go to the FBI's website and pull up crime in the United States and break it down by demographics, you will get this table, which is how many people are convicted for a crime by race. And you'll notice down at the bottom it says violent crime, which is everything from murder to rape, robbery, aggravated assault, burglary, larceny, theft, motor vehicle theft, and arson. And it's all of those. And guess who's at the top? Because those are numbers, and you can see which number is biggest, right? But if you scroll over to a much smaller, easier to comprehend number, which is the percentages, you'll notice down there it says 67% for white people and only 30% for black people. So you're right, statistics don't lie, you do. White people commit more crimes, more violent crimes in the United States than all other demographics put together.
There was a time in my life when I thought that gun reform was the answer to ending the mass that is a huge problem in America. And then I thought, you know what? Prohibition has never worked in this country since alcohol prohibition, since telling doctors they can no longer write pain medication to patients, and so then patients now go and get fentanyl off the street or buy something that seems to be actually even worse at a gas station. Well, I do still feel like some 20-year-old probably doesn't need a machine. I do think that that is not going to get rid of the problem. So then there was a time where I thought it's a mental health crisis, right? And I think we can all agree that these people do have mental health problems and that our country does have a mental health problem in general. Forgive me if you've seen this on the news, but I was listening to TV the other day when this recent one happened at the Catholic school in Minneapolis, and one of them brought up loneliness. You hear about the male loneliness epidemic, and ever since COVID, people are less connected. And again, something that probably does factor into some of these situations. But what I don't hear people talking about is the demographic of the people who commit these crimes. And of course there have been exceptions, but the vast majority of the people glorifying Columbine and taking part in these atrocities, young white males who usually fit the description of someone that would be categorized as an incel or involuntarily celibate. And again, I'm not like discovering this issue for the first time. I just don't think it's talked about enough that white men are the problem. They are in so many places and scenarios. But specifically, white men who aren't reaping the benefits of a society that is designed for them to succeed and be happy and flourish above all, above everyone else, to be the breadwinners, the winners, the top of the food chain in America. And when some of those men are not given women and money and power and success on a silver platter as they've been promised, the unspoken promise that is painted in every picture around them, they get angry. They get angry at women. They get angry at Black people. They take it out on children to get the most attention that they possibly can and have their name uttered because they are nobodies and they will never have the charisma to be who they so desperately believe that they were born and entitled to be. So when we teach young men no is a complete sentence and that they aren't entitled to everyone and everything in the world and that they need to humble themselves and work for things and accept that they may not get everything they want, instead of telling them that they deserve everything for doing little to no work other than just existing in the body that they just got so lucky to be born in. We are reinforcing life-saving values. These conversations we have about consent and equity and equality aren't just pointless conversations pushed by radical liberals and woke people. Over time, these ideals and these conversations could save the life of a child or an innocent person in general from an incel who thinks they have not been awarded what they were put on this earth to have.
It's amazing how when white people die by the hands of other white people, you know, the white on white violence that's happening here in America right now, that they want to blame everybody else but other white people. It's not Black people that did it. It's not brown people. It's not Asian people. It's white people. You, your own kind. White on white violence is what is happening in America. What, our governor just took taxes off guns? Why? Who are the people buying more guns? It's not Black people. Black and brown people are not as violent and dehumanized as they make them out to be. So they continue to tell themselves a narrative about Black people, and then they prove it wrong all the time. You prove your own self wrong. It's embarrassing. I know the governor of Utah, the mayor, whoever in Utah was just so embarrassed that it happened to be a white man that went out and killed everybody, because that's what they do. And then they flip the story and they have all of the media convince everybody else that it's not them. But once you got a finger pointing at somebody, you got three pointing back at you, baby. You got three fingers pointing back at you. You point at Black and brown people, but you got three fingers pointing back at you. So what are you doing? What are you doing over here? Sad, embarrassed.
People don't believe me when I tell them this, but the reason I started posting anti-racist content is because of my experiences with sexual assault. I had two different experiences, once when I was a 14-year-old freshman in high school and another time when I was an 18-year-old freshman in college. And both times I was assaulted, it was a white man from a wealthy family, and I came forward, reported it, and obviously nothing happened, right? So in the aftermath of everything, I was trying to make sense of how could this system that I believed in fail me, and just feeling so isolated, alone, and angry. So I started researching feminist content and how to hold these men accountable. And that was when I started college as well. So at Brown, I was learning a lot about race, class, and other social issues around the world. And so between my independent research and what I was learning in class, I realized that my experience was not unique in any way, shape, or form. And in fact, it is an inevitable product of a corrupt system. And to me, you can't promote women's rights without also promoting the equality and freedom of Black and brown people worldwide, or the freedom of trans, indigenous, queer people, because every single struggle is intimately connected. And just like the system failed me when I was too young to protect myself and needed somebody there, it fails plenty of other people too in different ways.
There always has to be one. There is always someone who has bought into the manufactured idea that people with melanin are more violent than people without. There is always someone out there loud and wrong that slips into the comments with a subtly racist remark, and then when I call them out on it, they get blatantly racist. But I always wonder, can you blame these people for how they think? Because the media always portrays us as violent. Look at the difference between the protests a couple days ago and the protests of 2020. 95% of those protests in 2020 were peaceful, uneventful, but they were not covered. And the only thing that was covered was when the riots happened, which were started and escalated by the law enforcement. The only thing that people like this saw were the escalated images. And without the education system actually teaching history and unwhitewashed history in our schools, it is really hard for people like this to understand and know the truth unless they actually go out of their way to read and learn the truth, which, come on. Most people can't even find a good source to the truth of real history. A lot of the time, we only learn about 5 people that did great acts in the civil rights movement and beyond. We don't really know much about the people that helped us get out of slavery itself. And a lot of people don't even know what happened during slavery, being that schools now are trying to equate it to indentured servitude with free housing and healthcare and food. But if you are feeling some kind of way about your level of knowledge about Black history, I got exactly what you need. Black AF History, The Unwhitewashed Story of America by Michael Harriot. This book goes from the start of slavery and how it started in the first place, all the way to the two-party system and how that was even invented to keep Black people in check. This book talks about the resistance leaders that we had during the slavery times, as well as the leaders that we had even after the Emancipation Proclamation. This book even talks about the Second Amendment and the creation of correctional facilities and officers. After reading this book, you can get a sense of how America was created and the systems that were put in place from the very beginning to keep Black people down. It even goes into how ghettos were created and how the hood was formed, creating so-called gangsters and hood life in the Black community in order to keep us at the bottom. I don't expect the person who wrote this comment to actually want to enlighten themselves and read this book, but for the people who are waking up and the people who are realizing that Black people have been targeted and you really want to know and understand our history, this book right here is going to be what you need. The last time I tried to make a video about this was out of stock, and it has less than 1,000 copies right now. It is also 20% off, so I would go ahead and get your copy super quick before they sell out again. This keeps selling out so quickly, so I have been waiting to make a video about this, and I'm doing it really quick so that you can get yours now.
Good afternoon. Thank you as always for your kindness and for your insights. What effect did racial slavery have on slave owners? My friends, stay with me for a second. This is a question you might never have been asked or never even thought of. So let's think about it together. If you owned another human being, what effect would it have on you each and every day? Because in case you haven't thought about it before, it's incredibly difficult to own a fellow human being. That means you have to be able to control that person's every move. And to do that means you're going to have to exert abuse, violence, maybe even sexual assault, all of the things that were a part of racial slavery in America. And here's the question. Why haven't we ever engaged in serious discussions about the effect that slavery had on plantation owners? Because if we did, we start talking about the effect it had on the larger culture surrounding those people. That means not only the people doing the enslaving, but the other fellow human beings who sat by watching it happen, sanctioning it with their silence and complicity. My friends, we have to talk about this because there's something about whiteness that's tied to racial slavery, because after all, the only people in America who could be enslaved were people defined as being Black. And you and I know there's no such thing as race biologically. So what about the quote white people? What effect did racial slavery have? The violence, the brutality, the subjugation, the sexual assault, the separation of Black families in plantation slavery, what effect did that have on, dare we say it, white society? Well, we have to be honest. We never ever talk about something called white culture. Is that such a thing? But if there was such a thing on white culture, what effect did the cruelty, the barbarity, the violence, the abuse, what effect did that have on the larger white society? And by the way, after slavery ended in America, we had another 80 years of legalized racial segregation discrimination called Jim Crow. So the violence continued, the barbarity continued, but what effect did it have on us, the people who call ourselves Americans, especially those of us who consider ourselves white? These are difficult questions that we have to ask ourselves, and more importantly, they're difficult questions that we must ask our children, because the children are always watching. You guys be well and have a great rest of your day.
White women are just as violent as white men are, but white women have learned how to outsource their violence so they don't get their hands bloody. White men will enact violence with their own bodies. White women will enact violence through white men. That same violence that white women vilify in white men is the very same violence white women will utilize against black and brown people without pause. This is why white feminism is white supremacy.
Now, listening to the clips that I've just played, you get to understand that the large percentage of those who commit crimes in America, especially violent crimes, it's not black people, it's not the minority groups, it is the whites. I know this can be attributed to the huge percentage of whites in America, but then let's talk about the narrative that has always been perpetuated in the media. That which the media talks about mostly is when these crimes are committed by black people. And therefore, if they want to portray anything bad that is happening in America, they tend to have it leaning towards black people. For example, you'll get to see that a black person commits a crime, and the way the media portrays that headline, it's totally different and skewed compared to when a white person commits the same crime. We've also known the institutionalized racism that exists, that has always also had crime rates in America being misreported so that black people crime statistics are propped up so that they appear like they're high. And that narrative that has always been perpetuated of hating on black people gets to be sustained. That really tells you that nothing is ever respectful for black people in America. Most violent crimes in America are numerically committed by white individuals because they make up the largest portion of people in the US population. Statistically, more people overall means more offenses every category, including violent crimes. However, the public narrative often ignores this context, instead focusing disproportionately on crime committed by black individuals, reinforcing the harmful stereotypes on black people. The distortion is rooted in institutional racism, the systems of media, policing, and politics that have historically portrayed black Americans as inherently dangerous. Since slavery and Jim Crow, racist ideologies have painted black people as threats to white safety and order. These beliefs were institutionalized through policies like segregation, redlining, and over-policing of black neighborhoods, embedding racial bias deep within American structures. The media has played a powerful role in sustaining this bias. News outlets are more likely to highlight violent crimes involving black people and use mugshots of sensational headings, while similar crimes by white offenders often receive softer coverage. This selective storytelling shapes public perception, creating a false link between blackness and criminality. Law enforcement and the justice system reinforce this imbalance. Black communities are heavily surveilled, leading to more arrests and convictions, even for the same behaviors that go largely unpunished in white communities. Racial profiling, biased sentencing, and mass incarceration all ensure that black America appears more criminal in official statistics, despite the underlying social and economic inequalities driving crimes across all races. Ultimately, the tendency to blame black Americans for violence reflects the enduring power of institutional racism. It's not about who commits more crime, but who the system chooses to punish and portray as guilty. Until those racist foundations are dismantled in media, policing, and public consciousness, the myth of black criminality will continue to serve as a convenient cover for systemic inequalities. And that remains to be the truth. Black people have always been misjudged. Because of over-policing within black communities, it is obvious that the number of crimes that police will arrest are many. If you go to white communities, the things they do within themselves, sometimes they are not over-policed, and therefore some small criminal activities can be overlooked. So if you compare these kind of things, you'll get to understand why the system is so biased against black people and that it is working day and night to ensure that blacks don't get the best that they deserve. Share your thoughts down in the comment section, and if you're watching us for the first time, remember to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and share. Thank you, and let's meet on the next one.